find out whether that works. Oh, clickety
And
clack, clickety clack.
and we're live.
We okay. Um, I'll do the Nick Zentner trick here of saying this episode brought to you by Coca-Cola.
Okay.
Maybe that'll. If you don't know about Nick Zentner, he's an absolute scream, a brilliant educator here in Washington State, who I bumped into because he does stuff on the geology of the region, and I'm now a total addict to his college course video streams that he does in addition to what he does in the college environment. And good God, he's one of the best explainers I've ever seen. So anybody, if you haven't heard, I'll type that into the live chat here to see as well. Nick Zentner. Boy, if you don't know about him, if you're into geology and all that crap, if you don't know about that, subscribe to his channel and help out and pay attention to all that because he's absolutely superb. Anyway, we're on the air here. Let me be really abrupt right off the bat here while we still have a connection going. And I want to thank our patrons right off the thing. Our colleagues, Hendril, Eric Rowley, Speed of Sound, Sarah Zeshi, our researchers, Travis Adams, Ian Chan, Convert Me, Stephen Early, Eat Meal, James Fitzwater, History Minor, Ralph McFadden, Apologia, Benjamin Simpson, our assistant researchers, Duranku, Totus Real, Christopher Johnson, friends Daniel, Steve Bauman, Marigale Bedos, Insects Cool, Devin Reeves, Morton Nielsen, Paul the Skeptic, Buffalopicus, Bo Rasmussen, Alex Stone, Paul Williams, and in times past, our legacy patrons, Jen, Jody, Mike, John, Keith, Andrew, Dyer, Dewey, Mona, Brad, Daniel, Nanya, Staggles, Sunsky, Stone, Ugly German, Truce, Everett, and every one of you in your own ways have been helping out to where um, it's easier to work out the bill paying, food, ink, all the other crap that's going on. That Patreon account coming through at the beginning of every month, along with Social Security and the struggles of book royalties, is much nicer than the position that I was in a couple years ago. So that the thank yous are definitely out of the way. And may I remind everybody, given how testy and worrisome our economics are, I totally understand if some of you have to pull the plug on your contribution to the Patreon. So at no point should you have to say, hey, important things with my family versus gives crap to RJ, I lose. Just remember that. But everybody that has stuck it out all this along the line, I'm very, very, very super grateful on you. But always maintain the priority on that. Dapper Dino does the same thing. The various ones that say, don't remember what's important here. So anyway, part one, of course, I'm continuing the analysis of replacing Darwin at the source level, which is to do something that the authors of that book, Jensen, didn't do, which is like,
Whoops. And you froze, RJ. Why is all of this always working until we go live? So I have no clue what. RJ, if you can hear me, refresh because we lost you. Okay. RJ is trying to reconnect. And let's see if this works. Nope. RJ, you need to refresh again. Something's not working. This is totally weird. By the way, hi Diana.
Hello, that's Peter on the other half of the screen. Didn't think he looked
Yeah,
like a whirring gears.
you're you're
Uh,
you're back. You're back again. You're back again. And you're frozen again. This is really frustrating that we can't get this to work, because the moment everything is off air, it's fine. The moment we go live, we get problems. So I have no clue why this is happening. Everything is completely fine until we hit the go live button. And it's not only a lag on RJ's part, there's a lag here as well for some stupid reason. No clue why that's happening. No, Diana, it's not your fault. I wouldn't want to blame you for this. I blame the designers that made all of this. No clue why this is happening, because we set up the entire show, everything worked. RJ could switch from one screen to another, no problems whatsoever. The moment we click go live, we've got problems.
Woof,
Okay,
back
and
again.
and you're back.
Yeah, this is what we'll just expect. Just think of this like ghosts of Christmas past popping in every once in a while. Um,
I have
the
this weird idea, RJ, that it
Mhm.
is somehow tied in with whether or not I click the go live button. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to click absolutely nothing, just leave it
Yeah,
like it is, and
and just ride the waves. Just ride the
exactly,
waves.
exactly.
Okay. Anyway, I'm finally nearing the completion of Jensen's chapter 3, which is basically a rehash of basic genetics that he's dangling little pieces of it to set up his argument for his young Earth creationist model. It's going to be unspooled primarily way down in chapter 10. This is kind of a spoiler alert because Dan Stern Cardinale had gone through a quite detailed discussion in various venues of why Jensen suffers from cranial blockage of the rectum at the fact level. And I'll be alluding to some of those little things in subsequent chapters. But I'm approaching it from just a source methods direction, which is how much of the data field is he playing fair with? And he brings up at the tail end of a footnote, he was bringing up a paper from 2015 on the donkey genome that he thinks somehow is an indication just that mutation rates are kind of trivial and most of the genomes are unchanged. Well, that paper explicitly identified that the donkey species diverged around 1.5 to 3.3 million years ago, and they also pinned down a suite of adaptive mutation shifts that compared then to the horses and what variations have been taking place, talking about specific gene components, none of which is alluded to in Jensen's piece. And he also cited a 2005 paper, that's kind of old for 2017, by Lindblad Toll on domestic dogs. And by the way, once this thing gets posted up on the video land, I'll be putting up the references and all of that to what was going on here. Last week's episode has disappeared completely. I'm not sure where it is on YouTube, but it's not showing up on my listing of videos. So if it turns out to be gone with the wind, I'll probably go ahead and redo that episode and just renumber the things, and we'll worry about that as time goes on, because it will have been functionally lost. Um, Anyway, Lindblad Toll on domesticated dogs, they identified the gene duplications in their lineage as well as the detailed canid phylogeny, which goes back like 10 million years. So none of that is alluded to in that cute little footnote. Not only that, they maybe shouldn't have brought up that paper from Lindblad Toll because their group didn't stop work in 2005. And so I will also be putting in a link to a 2011 paper that they did on human evolutionary constraint using 29 mammals, which shows further connections with the standard evolutionary model. So we're seeing, I catalog both of those papers that he cited them as misrepresenting source material because he's leaving out really relevant stuff. He wants to cite a paper and address the content of it. I'll be also looking to see whether that 2011 paper shows up later on in his references, because remember, I can't figure out what his references are until you go through footnote by footnote by footnote by footnote. And that means because he doesn't have a damn bibliography. So just as I did with Rupi and Sanford's book, I'm going to be doing this with the Jensen material, and that means that this will be available, and I made it available to everybody in the same way that when Erica, our dear sweet Gutsick Gibbon, did a criticism of Rupin Sanford, I supplied her with the information that I had generated from these videos for the reference bibliography for that. And I was just using that little funky thing just today because several viewers of the previous episodes have alerted me to various things over the years. And one just a little bit ago mentioned that our dear acquaintance Standing for Truth had trotted out a bunch of criticisms of Erica and others on Australopithecus sediba and all of that. And they wanted me to do an analysis of it, source analysis, which I'm going to be doing probably next month because I'm still plugging in a lot of the reference material, but I'll be definitely linking to the video Standing for Truth, which is a 2-hour, 25-minute long screed that inadvertently is really revealing. If you ever wanted to see an example of how a secondary source addict functions and their complete inability to tell the difference between somebody saying something about a data field and the data field that they're talking about, this video is it. Because you literally get to peek over his shoulder as he's reading stuff off. I didn't know until, thank you, Standing, for pointing me in these directions. Rupin Sanford have a website that I wasn't aware of, where they kind of keep track of the new information. And this was what Standing for Truth was riffing off of, that he would just be reading big swaths of this material and accepting what it said at face value. And so there's a bunch of technical literature that I've been tracking down on things. There's a few more that I need to post on. Some of the chunks, well, between this newer video and his previous work, for all practical purposes, all Standing does is simply copy off of Rupin Sanford. And there are a bunch of creationists that do exactly that. And since they're misrepresenting the source base, I think I measured a number of about, I think it was close to half of their technical papers that they were citing they were misrepresenting the contents of in one way or another. The one thing that differentiates Rupin Sanford from Jensen, though, so far, and from what I've seen also of the analyses farther down in the chapters, Rupin Sanford are really addicted to authority quoting. So they have long stretches of very tactically worded snippets from the various papers they allude to get their authorities on their side. Jensen doesn't do that. Jensen, so far, there's been practically no authority quoting. He's simply doing the footnote fiddling, which is to make assertion after assertion after assertion with a little litter of footnotes in it, where you have to go then to the footnote, find out what it is it's referring to, and then it's often really massive amounts of references, which unfortunately don't help his case. Just as I was pointing out about the matters of the Lindblad-Poe paper, Lindblad-Poe paper and others. It's that looking up the original material doesn't necessarily help their cases. So we'll leave that aside there and resume our discussion of this particular plan. I'm also maybe going to have a debate with Mr. Batman later on in the month on dinosaurs coexisting with people. And
are you a masochist?
Yeah.
You're going to debate Mr. Batman.
I can anticipate pretty much what he's going to spew. There's a slight shift. James realized that he double booked something, so they're trying to shift time over to Wednesday. But I told him I have Evolution Hour at 7, so you know, or thereabouts ish. So that means it needs to be a little bit earlier. So theoretically about 6 o'clock, but that hasn't been finalized yet. The main thing is as those of us who know me know, I really love dinosaurs, and I'm fascinated by them, and I'm interested in them independent of the creation evolution issue. And so this is an area that I am not unfamiliar with just by general interest. So if anybody's going to try to specifically jiggery pokery dinosaurs, they're running into somebody that knows the data field fairly well. And I'm going to be just fascinated to see uh, just exactly what field Mr. Batman thinks he's operating on in relation to this, as well as which ones of the standard tropes they're going to be bringing up, you know, the ecostones and various other things that have popped up. It's the usual shtick. So yes, I've interacted peripherally with Mr. Batman before. He's a pompous jerk, I suppose, would be a charitable way of putting it. I'm an arrogant bastard, so I'm not claiming to be sinless here. But the point is, I do have my bloody damn facts straight, and I know the material, and I source fact check things. So he's not going to be able to bullshit any of the dinosaur data in relation to that. Hear that? Standing occasionally sees the shows and all of that. And I will say, the Lavender Lady, if Diane's still in the thing, do not blame yourself for anything that has gone wrong with this. You know, it's the old fart here and the assistant to Peter. I mean, I was just telling him before we went live how I'm still amazed at the fact that here is Peter in Holland and I'm here in the United States, and we're doing this interactive thing electronically from a little magic box that's sitting on my desk with little cables coming out of it. I'm amazed that it works at all. So we should all enjoy and take delight in the fact that we have the ability to communicate and share information on a global scale that would have been considered miraculous and super sciency back when I was growing up in the 1960s, where computers were great big things with tape drives and worry wheels that insurance companies and governments had, and spy agencies, but not people on their desk.
It
And
would
so,
still be the same thing when I got my first computer in what
yeah,
83, and in the
yeah,
90s. I mean, this was impossible.
yeah. And the
We
fact that we can literally carry around a portable computer that is a telephone and a Google search and a email mechanism and all of this stuff simultaneously.
and
And the
has
bloody little smartphone
and
has a
and
bigger
has
memory
more
in it than my PC.
and it has more computing power than the computers used to do the moon landing with.
Oh
That's
yeah, yeah. Everybody's smartphone has more computer power than all the computers on Earth in 1960. That's amazing.
it is.
And that it has a cutting edge because PC, laptop, smartphone, how dare anybody be stupid in 2020 with tools like that at their disposal?
Yep.
How dare they? There's
And
no
still
excuse.
they are.
And still they are. And which brings us to the methodology issue, which is my major thing is that how do their brains do that? So we see this at the source level. I've mentioned this many, many times and will continue to do so because it's the take home issue. You have three layers of thought, and most people forget the bottom. Not that they don't do it or don't connect up with it in some ways, but they don't consciously recognize this, especially when they're bumping into people who have their head up their ass at various levels. You have a philosophy level, materialism, liberal versus conservative, religious versus atheist. There's a whole bunch of things that are up in the philosophical presumption level. Then there's what I call the data floor. That's really big and getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. The physical history of things, the technical articles on science work, the physical research that's done, the actual physical fossils, the genomes, all of that stuff. It's just staggering. In my own work, I have bumped into, I'm just about nearing, I think I'm about 50 sources shy of 28,000 technical papers in my data field. Those are written by upwards of 69,000 scientists. I keep track of this stuff, which means that I can measure from my own experience the scale of the data field. This isn't even the entire data field. There's way more stuff going on than just that. But this is stuff that I'm bumping into with the direct connection to creation evolution issues. And the fact is that that vast data field is going to be filtered in some way into people's apologetics. Many people will be doing evolution defenses, and they put up a few pictures of critters and things, and they post their thing on YouTube and find dandy, but there are no direct sources for it. Others will be a little more detailed and will be discussing technical science literature and alluding to it, and may or may not put the links in their video. FYI, put the damn links in the video. If you're going to do at least at the very least, your primary important take-home papers, if they're accessible, open access. You don't need to be anal retentive about it if you're just sticking up the URLs to papers that are not open access. But if they are in fact open access, the principle that I've been using is put the damn link up. So anybody watching the video next week, next month, next year, next century, however long it goes, will be able to access that information in a way that will be useful and make some help out of it. Now,
And you froze, RJ.
maybe I'm
No,
okay.
no, you're back.
Circle's
No, you're
coming
back.
on.
Oh,
Maybe not
no, no.
losing. Yeah.
It's
Cross fingers. Cross
it's
fingers.
back. It's back.
Having trouble connecting. Having trouble connecting. Okay. Well, it's still live chat. Still seems to be operational. Okay, there we go. And Peter is back, gearing wheels and all that. We're still on. Yay!
Yep.
For the moment. Anyway, yeah. Thank you. The source method's basement is where do you get your sources from? Why do you regard some as reliable and others not? Do you fact check statements in them against that data field to make sure that they are in fact reliable? If you're dealing with sound science work, you're going to be able to confirm the data points by checking their source references and other things. If you're dealing with pseudoscientists, it doesn't matter how many footnotes they have, you're going to discover that in large blocks, there's things where they're misrepresenting source fields. They're leaving information out. And believe you me, the history of stupid is littered with people who have created an argument that's based on a limited data field. Eric von Daniken will do it with the ancient astronauts. You find people talking about COVID-19 now, where they cherry pick their little booklets and they go on about hydroxychloroquine and all that kind of stuff, but they're not really paying attention to most of the data field. The essence of Nick Zentner, who by the way, I misspelled his name back in there. Let me type his name in correctly. I forgot to add the extra thing. Nick, NickZentner. There we go. The geologist guy. He operates in exactly the same way in terms of source methods. First, you find out what your data are. What are your observations? Don't let your philosophy color the observations. First, you just look at what the things are. If you jump in with, oh, I think this is what happened, it tends to constrain you and make you miss things. Human beings can do that. Everybody can do that because they're looking for a thing. But the really tough, brilliant people in the scientific community, first of all, want to know what the facts are. And then they can kind of settle in and go, well, does this favor one type of hypothesis or another one? Or maybe a new hypothesis is needed to account for it. Let's look into it. Let's figure it out. And that's how rigorous science works. And then you get to the point of where you're presenting that material, you're doing peer-reviewed literature, you may be defending it to the death, but yet there may be people criticizing you. And then the people coming in looking at that can now read their position and the other positions and try to make sense out of it. And then as a collective group, more and more people decide, that one set of arguments ain't going well. That's not really accounting for stuff. That's where you eventually end up with consensus on a lot of fields. And other areas may have a degree of uncertainty about them. And these issues can shift over time. So a lot of the big paradigm shifts, to use that Thomas Kuhn phrase, occur because new data comes along that upsets people's apple carts. But remember, the old data won't go away. In every argument about controversies in science, it isn't that the old data was wrong.
And you froze again, RJ. I didn't touch anything on my end, so Not sure what the problem is. I think it might be RJ trying to reconnect. So we'll have to see if RJ comes back. If not, we'll go to a quick commercial break. That always helps. Doesn't seem that RJ is going to get back. Okay, RJ is refreshing. We'll go to a quick commercial break. Yep, and we're back from the commercial break, and RJ is back too.
Facebook lobbed a video on a creation evolution discussion site about Carl Werner's anti-evolution stuff. If you're not familiar with Carl Werner, you are the better person for it. Carl Werner is an oddball creationist, writes a bunch of relatively short little works. He comes from Germany. He's a minor player even in creationism circles. He doesn't have a huge following, but he pops up occasionally like up dandelions on the lawn. Anyway, this little teeny excerpt, and I'll be putting up a linkage to that once I get the video edited up, has some authority quotes from Gunter Veal and Peter Veldhofer, who are both people who research the origin of pterosaurs, which are those cute little bat-like reptiles, flying reptiles that were dominating the dinosaur period up until birds really started kicking in the Jurassic and Cretaceous. And unlike the birds that survived the KT extinction, the pterosaurs didn't make it. And some of the small pterosaurs that started out eventually kind of got nudged aside by birds, as far as we can tell. The giant ones adapted fairly effectively of those giant Quetzalcoatlus and those huge gliders. They were the size of bloody Cessnas. And some of them were even terrestrial predators on the island bits. They probably were able to glide there. But there's a whole ecosystem of figuring out just how energetic and how dynamic pterosaurs were. And because they're totally extinct, it all has to be done by retroactive consideration as to the size of the organism and how easily it could go into flight and what kind of flight muscles it might have had and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, I mentioned that the earliest pterosaurs are small, and they are indeed. They're like the size of crows. They're very small. And in fact, anything that has really small bones, lightweight, falls apart easily when it dies, they have terrible fossil records. Bats are in the same boat. So it's no coincidence that the appearance of pterosaurs in the Triassic is murky, but not as murky as it was. And that's where we get to another little bit that the Werner video had a thing where they were quoting their own words might surprise you, quote, We know only little about the evolution of pterosaurs. The ancestors are not known. When the dinosaurs first appear in the geological record, they are completely perfect. They were perfect pterosaurs, according to Günter Viel, curator of the Euromuseum, Germany. And as for the ancestors, the possible ancestors of pterosaurs, there are only theories, hypotheses, of course. In fact, it is a mystery which group of reptiles prior to the Triassic might have given rise to the pterosaurs, and that was Dr. Wellnhofer. Well, I got his bloody book. And so I understood the context of all this. And this is what I refer to in my tip work as the Bermuda Triangle defense, which is you're saying, ooh, there are no ancestors, there are no fossils available. Well, why the hell is that? And that's because they're really small animals that are hard to fossilize. And the failure to mention that, I call the Bermuda Triangle defense because it's exactly like people who say, oh, the mysterious ship disappearance on September so and so, where they failed to mention the hurricane went through the area on that night. You think that might have had something to do with the mysterious ship disappearance? The failure to investigate that context is what I call the Bermuda Triangle defense. And Duane Gish was notorious at it, but creationists like Werner are doing the same thing. Well, the problem with doing old videos, reprising older material that are authority quoting snippets from books they don't actually bother reading all the material on, is that things move on. And the fossil genie, as I described in the book with Jackson, that you just got a plug for earlier in the show, and hopefully will be also put on as a second plug at the end of the show, is that a new fossil of critters that are probably very close to the pterosaur origin, Congonephon, I guess, tiny little critter with exactly the sort of features that are likely to have been where the pterosaurs eventually developed. It's like we were getting to see the little lizard-like mammal ancestor for bats. That same context, because we would know it'd be a probably arboreal critter that's small, nocturnal, and has the wherewithal to eventually develop into membrane flying and all that. Anyway, the technical paper on it isn't open access yet, although eventually it will be, because everything in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences becomes open access after a year. So just hold your horses, everybody, or your little pterosaurs. But anyway, there was a recent a news summary on it with a cute little dandy picture of the little critter, and that's from Smithsonian Magazine. And there's also one from thehindu.com, their SciTech Energy and Environment thing. They call it Meet the Tiny Bug Slayer, Ancient Relative of Dinosaurs and Pterosaurs, that I'll be putting a link up to on that one. And so the fossil genie, which is how we described it in The Rocks Were There, seems to be really friendly for evolutionists and not at all helpful for creationists, because there's constantly finding new things on there. By the way, there's a particular bone, I think it's called the pterygoid. It's a little teeny slivery thing on their fingers. And by the way, the reason why they're called pterodactyls, it's wing finger. It's one of their fingers, and I can't remember whether it was this one or this one. It's been ridiculously extended, and that's the thing the membrane hangs from. And we also know that the membrane has little hair-like filaments on it that they found fossils that are indicating that. And that connects up, interestingly enough, with the whole genetics of feather production, which is integuments, skin, and what kinds of stuff can sprout from them. And it's usually involving bone morphological protein and sonic hedgehog and all these other little things, because that's what happens with mammals with their hair and birds with their feathers. And so we've got increasing knowledge about how integument filaments work out in the two lineages that we can see living members of, birds and mammals. And that's also allowing us to interpolate and learn more and more and more of what was going on with the pterosaurs. And I suspect 15, 20 years from now, there's going to be way more technical material on this than there is now. And we can anticipate by then that the creationists won't be paying a hell of a lot of attention to that either. So, okay. Oh, we got a very stable milking stool in there. Peter's broken the internet again. No, that's me. StreamYard.
No.
Oh,
I think
you're taking credit for it, Buster?
No, I think I may have figured it out, because I think the problem with you dropping off is actually on my end. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure how
everybody I try to do StreamYard with, so don't take the credit yet.
No, no. It's probably because you have too many windows open. I do have a couple of windows open still. As long
Mm,
as I touch nothing and just keep on the show,
yeah.
you don't tend to drop off. The moment that I click on any other window, you're in trouble. So
Now
I need to
it's
figure
foible.
out how that works. I do have someone who could
Yeah.
help me with that, but
The same reason why I tend to shut down Twitter because that's a big memory hog and that gets to be a fist. And anything that's it's automatically updating in the background tends to do that. This
mhm.
is the first time I've done it where I've kept the YouTube Studio window up, not looking at it because that's how I'll be ending the stream, presumably by going over to that and going end stream, and that'll be the end of that. So if we had a mob in there asking questions, we would be able to at least Peter was able to give me the link to the live chat. I'm still murky as to why I'm not able to find the windows and stuff that I need on these kinds of things, and that it'll probably take a while. I'm an old fart from an ancient time when all of this was way too new. But the thing is, what I've been trying to do is catch everybody up to speed on the methods issue, which is old fart independent, which is sound methodology doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are. And it applies universally to all disciplines at all times and all places. How about that for a thing? That's why source methods is so fantastically useful. It's independent even from the technical veracity of the issue involved, because it is totally about the process of how people process information and whether they're playing fair with their facts, even independent of whether they're facts or not. So if somebody cites the Schmidlap paper and says that Schmidlap believes that dinosaurs are actually asparagus, and you look up Schmidlap and it turns out they don't mention dinosaurs and they don't mention asparagus, it doesn't matter whether dinosaurs are or are not asparagus. That person's citation of that paper was a methods failure. And that's why it's a universal toolkit. I first learned it because of history, where you look at how historians build up a picture of the past. And it's way more difficult than geology because, unlike rocks, which just sit there being rocks and you carve them up and look at them and measure them and make their characteristics, human beings can bullshit and artifacts can be propaganda and memoirs can be puff pieces. And so, you got to keep, oh, you're reading what Caesar wrote in his memoirs about his conquest of Gaul. Well, that's his propaganda version of it. How much of what he's saying is actually accurate? How much can you back up with archaeology and so forth and so on? So I was already steeped in a methods framework when I was learning history. And in that respect, science is comparatively easier, even though it's more jargon laden. Because when you read a history paper, you're more likely to just be names and artifacts and places and all of that stuff. But with science, you might be thrown off initially by the use of the specialized terminology, which is the same thing that happens in law, where you have specialized terms. We were seeing this when they're grilling Barrett in her nomination hearings on the Senate, that they all have highly specialized nomenclatures. And but it's not rocket science. You can find out what every single effing word means. You can find out how it's used. You can realize whether somebody is trying to pull a bullshit on you by dangling terminology that when you start looking at it, you find out, that doesn't actually mean what they're trying to make you think it means. And that's a source methods issue. If somebody is using terminology in a sneaky way to make you think something is going on, this pops up in that standing for truth stuff about the issue of whether or not there are Australopithecines coexisting with humans. And Roop and Sanford flat out say they are. Well, what they mean is that Australopithecines overlap the range of the early genus Homo, which would be Homo habilis and even down into Homo erectus, not Homo sapiens or any of the ones that are connecting Homo erectus with Homo sapiens. And so the attempt to dragoon them into the fold and say, oh, they're all living together only a few thousand years ago, nah, not going to work. And so that also puts up the big issue that I keep on banging the drum on of the map of time. that you should be able to have in your own head a conception of the chronology. And especially if you're going to be debating creationists, you need to have a functioning map of time and be ready to prod them in such a way that they reveal they don't have a map of time in their heads. And they may have a young Earth creationist not map of time, which is going to be a really short book with very few pages in it, and most of the pages are blank, versus your old Earth creationist and intelligent design map of time, which theoretically has a lot of pages in it, but you discover that most of them are blank. But there's just not a lot of data field going on in Peter says problems creationists can't tell the difference, and that's what's going to be popping up with that Standing for Truth video that I'll be covering in more detail next month. Is that it's a universal people who believe things that aren't true, that they can't see the difference between a secondary source and a primary source. And how this translates is that I don't think Standing for Truth realizes that even when Rupi or Sanford or Denson or somebody is authority quoting some technical paper and they got the little snippet, there it is, that's their words, that's not the same as the original work. That all you're seeing is a snippet of it. It's like somebody that's going to do a cheat. There's a routine that James Corden does every once in a while where he looks at celebrity photos and then they pull back and show you the whole picture. And it's a joke because they reveal that there's something going on that completely changes the context of what you're seeing. Well, that's in reverse exactly what ideologues do with data field. They tunnel vision in just enough. See, it's like saying, okay, here's the thing, there's the frame. There's the frame. Okay, now you can see in my frame, I have a nose, but no ear, and there's no thing outside of that, and you can't see my upper button and all of that, and therefore you don't realize that that's there. That's all you're seeing is that little teeny frame. Whereas what you need to have is the whole picture. And where you're looking at primary source manipulators, and there are relatively few of those. Those are the ones I call the fact claimants. And there's about 60 of them in all of anti-evolutionism. They're the ones who are doing the misrepresentation. When you get down to the Standing for Truth levels, they're not misrepresenting the source. They're copying people who misrepresent the source. They're repeating the people who misrepresent the source. And they never bother to look beyond that stuff. So it's really useful to be able to see them in practice, that inability to tell the difference between a primary and secondary source. And it's independent of intellect. You can be really bright Fortucan minds and fail to do that, and dull as a sack of hammers types, like Mr. Batmans and all of that, that operate it. But the method is the same. And it's an easy trap to fall into, apologetic reasoning. Most people don't have to be taught to do that. I wasn't taught to do that. It falls off the point because it's the essence of what it means to be an imitator. And you can sound ever so erudite by repeating the jargon that you've read somewhere else that you don't necessarily understand. Now, Jackson Wheat, my colleague, Apologia, Dapper Dino, there's a whole slew, Erica, Gutsy Gibbon, Dan Sturden Cardinale, Vice Rhino, there's a whole slew of people who were getting into that source methods approach to things all on their own. I didn't have to teach them how to do that. They were the ones that, in many respects, it's the reason why so many of them used to be creationists and have stopped being creationists because of that. Because they had that little epiphany moment where they thought, I'm going to actually look up the original stuff. I'm going to read the material. And then maybe I'll read this material over here that my sources never discuss. Why didn't they discuss that? This is really relevant material. Why aren't they mentioning this? At that point, you've jumped off the gangplank into the big pool of the data field. And there's, for most of the people that get into this, there's no going back. Once you realize what's going on, you're really compelled by the method to always look up the primary source and cross-check. As quite a few people in our network know full bore that I don't take anybody's word for anything. And I don't expect anybody to take my word for anything. And that means that when you offer the source material, you track it down. and to make sure that everybody's got their ducks in a row and everybody has their data field correct and nobody is misrepresenting source material. Oh, I try in my work, and Jackson in our collaboration, we definitely do that together, is that we never want to misrepresent a source. If we're offering what the creationist claims, we're not twisting it around to put words in their mouth. We let them say what they think. We let them offer their argument. We let them put forward their evidence. And then we examine all of that step by step, as well as putting forward our positive argument. Because intrinsically, just even if creationism is shown to be utterly preposterous, which it is, that doesn't necessarily prove the contrary. So you need to make a positive case for things. So we do the positive case for evolution and the negative case against creationism and show that one side pays attention to most of the data field and all of the data field, and the other side doesn't. I'm doing a direct measurement of that because I can tell you that overall, as an entire anti-evolution movement, they're bumping into only about 10% of the data field. And it's really selective about what they do to do that. So don't be wild when people put forward references and footnotes and all that and look scholarly. That may be a sign that they're a scholar and careful person, but you can't tell until you look. And exactly the same flaws occur with Dinesh D'Souza and his pseudo-historian stuff, David Barton, and for that matter, questionable scholarly methods with Howard Zinn on the left-wing side of things, Noam Chomsky in the left world. It's not being a Tartucan is an equal opportunity distorter. And once you start being driven by ideology and start cherry picking your facts and relying on secondary sources a little too much and not for primary sources and not thinking through what your model is to see how you can verify it or, for that matter, how you can disprove it. Those are the primary areas. And creationism, for me, has been a fabulous opportunity because, unlike some niche stupid, like relatively recent things like the 9/11 conspiracy theorists, by definition, all the moon landing hoax people have come along fairly recently because we only landed on the moon in 1969. So that's not. But creationism goes back 150 years. So you got lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people writing lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff over time, lots and lots of authority quotes, lots and lots of data field, and you can even see the evolution of things in young Earth creationism, for example, which is fairly recent. It's actually just about contemporary to the moon landing hoaxers in the sense that young Earth creationism is really starting to kick in the late 1960s and starts really burgeoning out where everyone's really noticing it by the mid 1980s when it hits the Supreme Court. So it's relatively recent. But they have mutated over time, branches of them in particular, to where plate tectonics, no plate tectonics, yes. In catastrophic plate tectonics, speciation, no. Oh, no, speciation, yes. We can't avoid it with superkinds, creating all sorts of species after the arc and so forth and so on. So I think I probably got most of the thing out of the way. It's about an hour. I've noticed because we started late, through no fault of anybody but our own. And I think that kind of covers it. We got an actual show going here. I am now going to let Peter put our shameless plug commercial up, which he did some wonderful graphics for again for the show. And then after that is all over, I will be going wave, and then I will hit the stop stream. So take it away, Peter.
Okay. Yeah, seems we got through it without too many problems, and I think I may have figured out what the problem is, so that's always a good thing. Yeah, I want to thank everyone for watching, and we'll see you all next time, I guess. I hope. Shameless plug.